Hello and good day. Here I am. I was black and my opponent was white, therefore. So let's start. He went e4, classic. And I'm going to go for the Pirc or Pierce or, the one, d6. And then he goes d4. Get that center. I go knight f6. Now that it's safe because I got that d6 protecting e5. Yeah, saying numbers and words and letters. And then knight c3 he goes, developing perfectly. And I go g6, getting ready to fianchet. He goes knight f3, very symmetrical and wonderful opening. And I go bishop g7, successfully fianchetted, and he goes bishop g5. Because can't resist a tasty horse. And so, but this time I said, I don't think so. Maybe not this time. Well, force him to choose anyway. I go h6. And he chooses, maybe that horse is not as delicious as he thought, but he wants to keep the pressure on. He's undecided. So he goes h4. Keep those eyeballs on there. I say, no. Do or do not. And then I say, by which I mean I went g5. The double pawn push. Typically it's very bad. Nope, hang on. Let me rephrase. It can be very risky to push the pawns in front of your king. Though I haven't castled yet. So anyway, so I'm making some committal decisions. But, when you play the King's Indian, you want to be pushing these pawns anyway. So for me, I just felt like it was too bonus tempo. And so, whatever, g5, right? And then he goes bishop g3. Forced to retreat. And then they go knight h5. I say, no, Mr. Bishop. You've worked hard. You've ran around. You were hungry for my horse. Now my horse is hungry for revenge. I'm going to put the screws, I'm going to put the eyeballs on you. I'm going to think of you as a dinner plate, Mr. Bishop. And then his other bishop gets jealous of all the attention, and he goes bishop c4. And I go, after 10 minutes of thought on this one, my first big think, because what do? Do I put my bishop on... I wanted to either face down that bishop, put it on, what is it on to start? C8, D7, E6. I was thinking about doing E6, bishop E6, and then maybe forcing a trade. It would double my pawns, but then his light square bishop would be gone, and he's not on that diagonal, which is always a big problem for me. Sometimes has been in the past. In these positions, right? It's always there. It's always pressing. So, or I go up and pin his knight on f3 by going g4. The classic. No to all that. c6. Then I could push. Maybe just I had this feeling of just like restricting his movement, and So you'll see how it goes. So let me start over. E4, D6, D4, knight F6, knight C3, G6, knight F3, bishop G7, bishop G5, H6, bishop H4, G5, bishop G3, knight H5, bishop C4, C6, and he goes H3. He's now thinking I've forgotten about his dark square bishop and is hoping to subtly get him out of danger. I say no. Knight takes g3. that bishop made how many moves in the beginning? 1, 2, 3. Anyway, that's a lot of tempo. So I'm like, I'm just going to grab it. Knight takes g3. Oh yeah, but I waited for him to push. I waited for him to make an opening for that bishop so that when I take it, he has to take to the wall. He has to take with the other pawn. So I go knight takes g3, and he has to go f takes g3 because h takes g3 is now no longer an option. So then I go b5. After he goes f takes g3, I go b5. Oh yeah, now pressuring the other bishop. And he goes b3. And I go queen b6. And he goes queen d3. I go a5. Now you can see I'm about to do the same thing. I'm just messing with his bishops. I'm not letting him get set up. This is my strategy. And then he goes a4. He goes a4 so that I cannot push, so that I can't go a4. But now, as I go b4, he can now not take his knight that's on wherever his knight is. He now can't go to the valuable a4 square to threaten my queen on b3. I suppose if a4, we're looking at the knights hopping from c3, could have, if he hadn't pushed that pawn, he would have been able to go to a4 with his knight after I pushed b. So I go b4, and he has to go the other way with his knight. He goes knight e2. And I go bishop a6. Staring at that queen, I had to think about this too because of bishop c4. He does use, instead of having to make another retreating move with his, with another piece of his, this time being the queen, instead he blocks it. But, that was fine with me. My pawns were mostly on dark squares. If I trade off this, and I do, I go bishop takes c4, and he goes queen takes c4. Now I'm like, okay, his bishops are out of the question. And I can work with that. I still have a bishop, a deadly bishop. Oh, my fianchettoed bishop, my goodness. I tell you, fianchettoing that bishop, people just forget about it. Or it just constantly applies pressure. You have that diagonal to work with, right? At least you have that one bonus piece that always feels like it's out of the way, but exuding, it's in the action and yet safely in the action. So that's, we can't go wrong with that. I digress. He went, where am I? Let's start to back at move 13. He goes a4 and I went b4, forcing him to go knight e2. And then I go bishop a6, threatening the queen, and then he goes bishop c4, getting in the way, and I go bishop takes c4, and he goes queen takes c4, and then I go e6. And I have to make a couple slow moves just in preparation, make sure everything, do your number count, and I felt that was good. And then he castles, and then I castle. We're just preparing now, things have settled. I'm ready for the next wave. So turn 18, he goes c3, and I go c5. And then he goes e5. There's a complicated pawn battle happening here, I know, and I'm just going to keep talking. Then I go, on turn 19, he went e5, and then I went knight d7. Helping with that pawn for the types of exchanges that was happening. Also, I needed to connect my rooks. So knight d7, it was time to develop that knight. Absolutely. Past time. And he goes e takes d6. But this is where I get clever. I don't take right away. You know, it was available to me, I think, by the queen. I go C takes D4. Because there's no time in case if he tries to push that pawn, I didn't want any nonsense. And so I go C takes D4. And he goes queen C7. Yeah, and that was a great move. He had to think a while for that, but that was a great way to relieve the pressure on, you know, what I was doing. I had to discover the check with my queen. And I do it anyway. I go D takes C3 check. I was basically forced because my knight was hanging and, you know, that pawn was scary. And then anyway, so he goes queen takes B6 and I go knight takes B6. Now the queens are gone. And he goes bishop takes C3. No, sorry, B takes C3. And my B pawn responds the same way. My pawn goes B takes C3. And now I have an isolated forward pawn. B takes C3. Oh my goodness. Then he goes knight F to D4. And I go rook F to D8. And he goes knight to B5. And I go knight to D5. Ooh. I think knight to D5. No. Wait. Oh yeah, knight to D5 is just a wonderful... I get as many defenders for that isolated pawn. I get everybody on board except for the one rook that's keeping the other pawn at bay. And then he goes rook A to C1. And I go rook A to C8. Pressure is building in this position. It gets a little hairy. And he goes rook F3. Bringing his last... anyone he can get eyeballing that pawn. But luckily... I am able to go C2. I just push it. I now have a defender of the file. And so I can just move up one. And then more than half of his attackers are now looking at the wrong square. And he goes rook B3. I believe... I don't know all the intentions of that, but I feel like there was... you know, maybe saw my fianched shadowed bishop in the corner and was like, oh snap, he's going to come over. So, you know, maybe he was trying to prevent stuff like that. So I go, I'm proud of this move because it's not, I don't know, it does like everything. Rook C4. Bring it up. It's threatening a pawn for one. It's also making a spot so that, you know, his knights were both always converging on this one square. What was it? Maybe D4, where my bishop could come and, you know, always thinking about that the checking diagonal for his king, because his king is exposed this whole time to that diagonal. G1, A7 diagonal, I guess. So anyway, yeah, so the rook going up there is it's just a presence, you know? It's very, very good, in my opinion. So yeah, that was rook C4. And then he goes king F2. Also, I mean, he kept it on the diagonal, but he's getting his king into the game. He's getting his last player. That's all I can think. But I feel like maybe too slow. However, I can't speak to what he had to deal with because he had to deal with a lot. There's running out of options, which as is my plan, right? Of course. And I go knight B4. Now I'm doubling the defense of my pawn on C2. I can no longer eat that pawn, but that doesn't matter. My passing pawn is king. So anyway, he goes rook takes B4. For a long time, he had to think about this. He went rook takes B4. Why? Oh yeah, because not only was my knight on B4 protecting that pawn, it was also threatening a fork in the king's new position. If he moves that rook. I can't explain why he did that. I mean, there was precious few options. I was staring as he was thinking. We were both thinking about the position, and yet there was very limited options for him at this point. You know, my webs are really coming together. So he takes my knight so that there's no fork problems. And I had to think for a while about how to take it, but it seemed crazy not to connect my passed pawns together, or at least hope to. So I take with the pawn, hoping to just, he can't stop 2 passed pawns like that, but he does have a race. Now we have a race. Promotion race. He goes, yeah, so I went A takes B4. He took rook, he took my knight, rook takes B4. I took with my pawn, A takes B4. He goes A5. I go B3. He goes A6, and I go B2. And he goes A7. He doesn't get, you know, it's the ballsy, it's that gumption, you know. He starts to show confidence in his plan, and you have to not let that mess with your brain, because you have to believe in the tempo. You have to trust that, you know, your pawn is further ahead. Everything in your mind checks out, so don't let him scare you. Don't let your opponents don't let your opponents scare you. Use your own wisdom. And I saw that even if he got his pawn all the way to A7, but he still needed to get the final square protected. So he was a move down. Like, it was close. It was close, but one tempo makes all the difference. So, and this is what maybe he was not expecting. I thought was good for me, was to not take and promote, but just to promote. Just go straight up. Because if I had taken, he would take with his knight. And now my pawn is blocked. And and no hopes of moving that knight in a hurry. In the meantime, he can promote himself, right? So instead, I go rook, or I just go B1 equals queen. And then if he takes, I take with the other pawn, and then I still have a queen. My queen, now I just have a queen on the board, right? And so that's good. And then he goes rook E1. I suppose bringing him to a safe square. And I go queen takes B5. You know, because that was the last guy. He was going to be able to defend that pawn. You know, it was a free piece. What can I say? And he goes rook A1. And I think for a little bit. And I was like thinking about the best way. I was looking for checks and stuff. But then I realized that fianchettoed bishop, my friends, he missed it. He forgot about it at the end. So many people do. I mean, he was maybe disheartened by the last couple moves and wasn't thinking as clearly at this point. So I just ate it. I ate his rook with my bishop in the corner, and that's game. He resigned at that point. Good game. I did good things. I managed to keep the position, understanding you don't always have to attack, keeping track of where the pawns are. What am I saying? No, I'm just saying words. Keep track of where your pawns are. Yeah, good advice. Do good job. Me do good job. That's what you should do. That's my advice for you. Okay. I don't know. Good game. Good game. I won another one. And I wanted to win, so, you know, it works out. Okay. I've exhausted my mental state, as you can see, so that's it. Thanks. I'll see you on the next one.